tech to help us change over. We're going to invite some folks from the community that have been really wonderful. Obehi, Janice has assembled them, and we're going to have a little conversation about some of the questions that came up in the performance. As an artist, you often don't get an opportunity to open up your work to people who are doing the work you want to talk about in your work, right? So, and we work in silos often, which is like the community that we're working with. So the great thing about being here at MIT and being in this cast residency is that we've had an opportunity to meet some really great people. So if we could get some chairs out here, and panelists, come on down. Yeah, I'll sit on the end. Abigail,
It is.
Okay, are we all set? Abigail Guillermo, come on down in a second. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do is ask the panelists to introduce themselves. We had an opportunity, some of us have met in October, some of us have just met just about an hour ago, and so this is a really an amazing group of people that are doing some really important work in this community, Boston, Cambridge area. So.
Hello everyone, my name is James Ramsey, originally from Dallas, Texas. I moved up here 2011 for college. Graduated, now I'm at Harvard Divinity School. I also work as a chaplain at Harvard. My particular interests are around the intersections of music and art, theology, and activism. I'm a musician, and I've also done work with Black Lives Matter Cambridge, so I'm interested in the ways that our discourse about God and humanity can be enriched by theological language, musical language, and activism on the ground.
My name is Ashley Rose. I'm an educator. I work at the Community Academy of Science and Health. I also teach art there, so I'm really excited to see them bridge the gap between STEM and STEAM recently, and I'm really excited to be here because I was a bio major myself, so there's a place where art and science coexist, so to see MIT do that through B-Boy is really excited. I'm excited to hear about some of the solutions.
Good evening, my name is Nia Evans. I'm with the Boston Ujima Project in Boston. In Boston, we are bringing together community members, grassroots orgs, small businesses, funders to pool their resources and create a community-controlled capital investment fund and a new local economy. Also do my creative partners in the audience, Tamasha Jackson, I'll shout her out. We also do work where we combine art and policy. What's interesting about tonight and where the work intersects with B-Boy I would say is when it comes to invention and experimentation and trial, and allowing us to consider possibilities and imagine something new.
Kenneth Bailey, Design Studio for Social Intervention. I'll see more when we're talking.
Erin Anderson. I run a company called Edom Arbor LLC, and one of our first initiatives is peace. But originally from Billings, Montana, came out here, went to school at UMass Amherst, and then went back to Montana to do my master's in intercultural youth and family development. So out here, I worked at the center community for a little bit, working on social justice, and activism has always kind of been in my mainstream. So I'm very thankful to be here amongst all these brilliant, brilliant people. So.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Good evening.
Good evening.
Awesome. My name is Catherine Morris, native of Boston, founder and executive director of BAMS Fest, Boston Art and Music Soul Fest. The reason why I started the organization is because I saw a 30-year deficit in the city when it came around entertainment, particularly for African Americans. We have many underutilized green spaces that are not used, and what that does is it impacts health and perception of where people live and the distances and how we perceive our neighborhoods. The reason why I'm here is because of the fact of I believe in the power of arts and its impact on young people, but also its power of connecting generations. And considering the city that we live in right now, where we're number one in everything else, we also have deficits in other areas, including arts and culture. So I'm very interested to see the solutions that we can talk about tonight.
Oh, you got a choice.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marsha Parrilla. I am the artistic director of Danza Orgánica, which is a dance theater, social justice-oriented dance theater company. I am also the founder of the annual festival We Create, celebrating women in the arts. The work that I'm focused on right now is on Puerto Rico and the diaspora in the United States. For those of you who don't know, because it's mostly not in social media and media in general here, there's a lot going on in Puerto Rico. It's a big, big, big crisis. And the work that I'm doing right now focuses on that and as it pertains also to blackness and colonialism.
Good evening, my name is Brandon G. Green, local Boston-based actor, creative, playwright, educator, originally from Selma, Alabama, so this is in my blood, social justice, and I'm working on a one-man show entitled it stands for Unintentional Martyrs, and talks about the war on black and brown bodies, and it's a cyclical nature of our martyrdom and how to end it. So.
What's up, y'all? My name is Cliff Notes, Boston born and raised artist. I run a company called Hipstery, and that focuses on the redefining of the future history of hip hop. And what that means is we're a film and music company, just as of now, hoping to expand. But that focuses on creating artwork that always has a connection to hip hop in some way, and also realizing that hip hop started with marginalized voices and marginalized stories, and those are the stories that we look to tell. So for example, our recent films that we've been touring around colleges around New England is two psychological thrillers about mental health in Black Americans. And we're also working on several albums that have similar subject matter. And also looking at intersectionality in art in general, just like B-Boy is doing.
Good to see y'all. My name is B.T. Brown. I'm originally from the planet of Brooklyn. Always Brooklyn people. Reside here in Cambridge, but worked in Codman Square at a school called Codman Academy Charter Public School. We are a K-12 experiential learning, social justice oriented arts and wellness initiative housed in sort of outward facing like a school, but not quite. And I'm excited to be part of a conversation that is trying to draw connections and sort of intersections between all the different elements that are named here today, because our students are always in between, they're never in one spot, and it's always beautiful to try to find those entry points so that they can also walk away with some strong skills. So it's part of the work.
Hi. Hey. Abigail DeVille. I did the costumes, and I'm a site-specific installation artist from the Bronx.
It's okay. It's okay.
But mostly my work focuses on purposely erased histories in the United States and abroad. And I use black holes as a metaphor for historical erasure. So the structures that I create loosely talk to cosmology and the fact that black holes are invisible, so it's a container of whatever.
Great, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna pose a question, and then I'm gonna let whoever wants to respond to the question just reach for a mic and respond, okay? So, thinking about the fact that bodies are speaking realities that aren't actually being talked about, right, at this point in time. If we're thinking about bee colony collapse syndrome, thinking about the silencing of Black and brown people through police brutality, poor education, mass incarceration, gentrification, the list goes on and on and on. So my question is, can making art actually help to rebuild communities? How and why is that important? You want a mic? Yeah.
As someone who teaches art and wellness, I actually think it can help to rebuild communities, especially if you start thinking about it in regards to colonies. We can learn a lot from animals, I think, from whether it's you think about bridges or cranes, but even bees, not only from their collapse, but also think about how resilient they are in regards to the swarm theory. If you think about art and cartoons, like back in the day, the first thing the bees would do is kind of like take a shape of a fist or a bat and they like chase you, you know what I mean? And kind of like slam you into a wall. I think if we kind of think about being resilient like that with Black Lives Matter, where there's not one real leader. You can kill one bee, but everyone has their own stinger, their own voice, a little bit of honey to give. So I think about if you start thinking about, we already kind of related art and bees and humanity before, but trying to figure out ways in which they've actually given and lived and persevered.
Anyone else want to take a hit at that? Brandon?
Definitely. So I teach with the iDream program here in Boston through Emerson College. It is Daniel Beatty's program. Poet, like amazing. He does everything basically. But what we do is you go into schools. I think we were at Cotman last year, I believe. But I'm currently at Snowden right now, and what we do is we get the kids in the community to, one, tell their story, and then two, write it and create it. So it's about transforming your pain into power. It's this whole thing. And how do you write your past down, and then create your future? So they are telling their stories and then imagining and working towards a brighter future for themselves. And if you think about where the change is going to come from, it's from them as they come up, as they become leaders, and yeah, so definitely.
Bringing it back to Puerto Rico. I'm Puerto Rican, born and raised. Moved to New York, then to Boston. And it's really heartbreaking what's happening in Puerto Rico right now. And it's even more heartbreaking that the United States is not taking ownership through the media. You don't see it. If you open the Times, you just won't see it. And so I think the arts is a great way to, like, first of all, create awareness. So with this new piece that we're creating, Melaza, we're telling some of those stories. And what I'm doing is I'm collaborating with people from the community of Puerto Rico through interviews, through video. We're going to do exchange and in conversations with them, like because the history is trying to get erased. We don't want to talk about it. We're like in that hole, like what's going on with Puerto Rico? I don't know if anybody here knows, but it's like, it's something that they rather not talk about. And so the arts, I think, is just like pivotal in telling the story for audiences that might not hear about it otherwise. and empowering a country that is really, they're working really hard in this empowering the country. They're cutting $512 million from the University of Puerto Rico, which is my alma mater, which will completely destabilize the education system. I can go on and on, but I'm utilizing the arts and dance theater to build community, strengthen the Puerto Rican community here in Boston, New York, and then create a bridge with Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I'll speak really quick. So in college, like one of my professors and mentors was named Nelson Stevenson, who was in a group called AfriCobra. And I think my work with him, I served as his assistant for 4 years, and him and I are still good friends and in touch frequently. But like art changed my life. I grew up at the end of a dirt road in Montana until I was, like 10 years old, and then moved like into the city space. And I think that my interaction, like learning about like the Black Arts Movement, was something that completely reformed me as like an individual. In 2010, I attended like a conference at UMass called Art and Power and Movement, and Amiri Baraka spoke, and Sonia Sanchez spoke. And at the end of Sonia Sanchez speaking, and I was just all about like her poetry from the beginning, and I was like, what do we do to like eliminate, this fear essentially that like breaks us all apart, that we as human beings have created. And she was like, sister, my sister, we just need to build a united front. And I was like, yeah, but how do we do that? But it was through art. Because I think it's a like base layer of like expression that allows people to, and I think when you talk about bodies and you talk about like violence against like Black and brown bodies, like in the United States, I study yoga, and I've been kind of like within this space, and there's something to say about like the souls that live in these bodies, but there's something to respect about the bodies that we're in. And art is a way of being able to kind of like see and express that, I think, and really feel that from an emotional like level and space. So yeah, I do think that like art is the main I think it is the mechanism and tool in order to bring people together and to change things. So.
Thank you. I think a lot about art being a way that you can transcend what the dominant culture says about you. You can redefine yourself, and I think that is something that really stands for me. I think about a lot. I have a question. So, are we getting too comfortable with these epic scale deaths that are happening right now?
Yes.
I think absolutely, and almost unintentionally, which is the scarier part. I recently made a film thinking about dating back to Tamir Rice, and I was really just reflecting on last summer, and every summer really, but just the amount of people that were dying and how often it was just everywhere. And I was like trying to finish up grad school and trying to work full time and trying to start this company, and at the same time I'm waking up every morning and seeing somebody die after somebody else just wished somebody else happy birthday on Facebook. And it's literally the way media is now. It's literally being force fed to us, and it's hard not to realize that that's happening. I mean, I remember when I was younger, this isn't a long time ago. This was like 7 years ago, but I just remember just like any like overt amount of violence that you were seeing on television, or anything like snuff films were such like a rarity, and now it's literally an everyday thing. And you can see Philando Castile die right now. You can pull your phone out and see somebody die. And it's painful, and I think one of the main things we need to take note of is that yes, we need to protest, and yes, we need to go out and do something, but I think the number one win over everything is figuring out how we can take care of ourselves amongst us. And self-care is like this new revolutionary thing to me, and because I'm a Black man, and it's just never been something that was highlighted, it's always been taking care of everybody else. And I think that is probably the most important thing moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's something really, maybe it's just a human thing, but I think it's especially relevant in our American, I don't know, milieu, that we can so easily digest human death. Like, that's not normal. Like, that's not natural. Like, I think a lot of times we are desensitized, maybe by necessity, to the atrocity of a human life being taken. Like, that is a tragedy every time it happens. And I love action movies, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a huge football fan, and I can just digest this stuff all day long. But I think there has to come a moment, and this isn't even new, like, you know, lynchings used to be a public spectacle. People used to bring their kids to lynching. It was a family affair, you know what I mean? Only way you can get past something like chattel slavery is if you kill a very human part of yourself in order to digest human death in that way. And I think we're in a moment now where we really need to take a step back and really sit in the horror of darker bodies, millions and millions of God images being snuffed out. Like, that is a tragedy worth reflecting and sitting in order to even begin to address liberation work, is to recognize what is being lost. And even when people aren't actually dying, I mean, what kinds of lives are they living, you know? Siloed into housing segregation. Sex slavery is still a thing. Poverty. So I think so much of this justice work has to begin with understanding the value of a human life. So I absolutely think we're in a crisis moment in terms of how we don't, and how we can play Philando Castile on repeat after repeat after repeat. And so, yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna say, I think based on what you were just saying in terms of recognizing the horror, like, there's a piece where we don't recognize the way in which Black life, which is a different thing than Black lives, all of us. Like, there's a way in which the way the stories get punctuated in terms of this Black life, this Black life, this Black life, but this is a part of a larger social history that's about a devaluing of Black life. And it's about us, it's about we, it's not about these punctuations of individuals, and we don't necessarily right now have a way to make sense of how and why. I mean, we understand it's part of American social history, but at this particular epoch, what's at stake with the presenting Black life as outside of subjectivity, presenting Black life as if Black life is still child life. I think there are ways in which, like, this woman, Christina Sharp, just wrote this book called In the Wake, and one of the things she poses is this moment an act of life of slavery? And in it, she also poses, like, are we subjects? Or does the United States see the Black body as a subject, or are we some outside, like some liminal space where we don't, does our existence matter? And I think those are the kinds of questions that we can actually struggle with through art and ritual and spirit and design. And I think that until we, one, start to see ourselves as we again, because I think we see ourselves as individuals. I don't think we see ourselves as we. If we have to learn how to see ourselves as we again, somehow, in this neoliberal era, which teaches us to be I's, not we's. And then from there, try to proceed in a context that doesn't recognize our subjectivity at all. Like, we aren't subjects in the United States. We're floating objects as sort of the detritus of chattel slavery. Once we sort of wrap our minds and our spirits around that, how do we proceed in a context which tells us that over and over again? I think those are the kinds of questions we need to grapple with, and I think that we can't grapple with that without ritual. We can't grapple with that without the symbolic. I mean, we're talking about a horror story. We're in a horror story. And in order to deal with that, we have to pull on the symbolic. And I think that that's what art really gives us an opportunity to do. It takes time. And the thing that's really interesting about this moment is the intensity and the speed of the episodes and the episodic, and it creates its own set of punctuations. And then I find myself and I find all of what we get triggered by the punctuations, which makes it impossible to actually conceive of how to deal with this horror. And so there are lots of different tricks that make it really, really complicated in trying to orientate ourselves to this particular moment in time. And I think some of the things we have to do require spirit, crime. When was the last time you were in a room with a bunch of folk and y'all cried together about what we're actually dealing with? Probably not. So I'm gonna stop. I will keep going.
Thank you. I have a few more questions, and then we're going to open up to the audience. So Guillermo mentioned in the performance that bees are hooked on antibiotics, right? So all the bees that are pollinating all of our food, they're drinking this mixture of sugar water and antibiotics in order to do that, right? So humans are also hooked on drugs, right? Whether they be prescription, whether it be sugar, whether it be bad food, whatever it is. I'm wondering, can we survive without drugs or other legalized killers of the body and spirit? How can we rebuild and repair? And how can we nourish ourselves with liberating food, education, and culture?
Awesome. I want to connect this back to the last question. I went to high school with Odin Lloyd, who was killed by Aaron Hernandez. So when I think about the addictions right now with the media and people like re-hashtagging murderers, I started a hashtag which was stop normalizing the murders of Black men. Once you start to replay these, once you start highlighting, because there are 4 families, whether it's Aaron's family, Odin's family, or the 2 Cape Verdean gentlemen, these mothers are crying. These are families that are really still hurt. So we have to stop this addiction to social media and feeding that feed in itself. I feel like that's one of the things we're talking about, a diet, feeding sugar, etc. But what you're feeding your soul in regards to what you're ingesting on your news feeds, when you turn on that TV, and what you're putting back in those news feeds, I think are a lot more, even more important than what we're actually ingesting in regards to food. We gotta be a little more organic with our thoughts. So that'll be something that I wanted to put in there.
I wanted to add to that point is I find that the question I always want to ask people is, what are you willing to sacrifice to start over? We're in a country, and to bring it narrowly down to Boston, we're in a place of convenience. Everything is instantaneous. You can pull it up on your phone. Your car can park for you. You can hire Stop and Shop to deliver groceries. Like the magnitude of socialization is so limited by convenience. And it's such a struggle. And when we're talking about Black and brown bodies, when it comes to things just like food, and I know there's these interesting movements around organic and eating whole and all these other things, but if you came out the womb with a lollipop, you're gonna grow up with that lollipop versus someone who came out of the womb with an orange. And between our school systems and parenthood and just environment, you have these flashing images and this kind of genetic information passed down about what's good for you, what's not good for you, so by the time the child grows up, the decisions are already made and they stick with that foundation. So my question has always been, are we willing as individuals, but also as a collective of people, willing to flesh out our system to start over again? And a lot of us don't want to do that because it tastes too good. It's just too damn good to let go. And if I do, who's going to hold my hand through this process and this road of sacrifice? As the road is never straight and narrow, it's always going to be bumpy. I don't know if a lot of us are ready to do that. We can't even turn off cable or see, Real Housewives of Atlanta. It's just too good, But imagine if, and I always talk to my mother about this, is she always gets on younger generations about the simple tool of writing a letter. No one knows how to write letters or checks or how to sign their name. Everything is by thumbnail. And kids are at an alarming rate of getting arthritis in their thumbs by the time they're 21. It's crazy. But if you take that away from them, it's like they're dying, but are they really? They don't know that. All they know is they came out the womb, boom, social media was right there. The development of books and being outdoors for more than 7 minutes, which is a statistic right now, is that young people between the ages of 14 and 21 spend less than 7 minutes outdoors. I'm sure there's some people in this audience who have spent a whole damn day and waited for their mom or their father to call them back in the house. That doesn't happen anymore. So now you have this isolation in which they're just not gonna come out of. I just hope that at some point we recognize that we are sitting in a pool of convenience, and until we're ready to drain it and our skeletons will be unveiled, I don't think we'll ever leave that place.
You go.
So, when I think, I actually have the honor of having a lot of friends and acquaintances who are in recovery from addiction. And I say the honor because I consider them survivors and I admire them and I feel like I learn a lot from them. And when I think about addiction, so for me this question is actually connecting a couple of the other questions as well. And when I think about addiction, I think about, from what I understand from my peers, what the roots of addiction are. And they're usually less about the particular drug or the particular material. And I'm also thinking about, I can't remember his name, but he's a professor at Columbia, Carl something. And he talks about the difference between certain types of drug use and actual addiction. So I also think about how we have tools in our society, and there are points. Our tools are useful up to a certain point, and then beyond a certain point, they become dangerous. And I think you just spoke about that a little bit. So when I think about the root of the struggles that a lot of people have, a lot of it, in my understanding, is a lack of real well-being, a lack of a certain type of health. Definitely whatever a person's personal struggles are, a search for a kind of love. And the way it connects to kind of the first two questions for me is we've just talked about pretty much just how hard life is. Life is hard. Life is very hard. And there are probably people amongst us who can probably remember when life was easier. I think most of us can agree today it's hard for a lot of us, whatever our background is. And so then that makes me think about what is the redeeming value of art? What is the redeeming value of moving from an I society to a we society? And considering each other's mental health, thinking about support systems that we can create. So when I think about the redeeming value of art, I think about what it is that we can create to lessen the blows of all of the different things that are coming at us. And so then when we think about the different tools at our disposal, and when we think about what we reach out to when we're struggling, we have some options. So we can reach out to social media or food or synthetic drugs or a friend or a conversation or a diary or a song. We recognize that we can maybe recognize that we have a few different options, and also just really think about how we can create a society where people can just be, which is absolutely not possible right now. And Kenneth talked about this a little bit, right? We can't just be right now. So I think that is a root source of addiction.
Can you want to say something?
No, I'm
You good?
letting somebody else.
Okay. You want to say something?
Sure, yeah. I was thinking a lot about what it means to be young in this society and how trauma affects the everyday. And thinking a lot about some of our 9th grade students or 14, 15-year-olds who, as folks have mentioned, they don't walk without this in their hands like this, and then are very, very interested in sort of beef patties right before coming into school, and right to the Skittles right after school is over, and I talk to them a lot about, well, what does wellness mean to you, and how can you eat healthy so that your body's in better shape, and what does that look like and feel like? I feel like a lot of it is about anesthetizing, right? A lot of it is about just taking away the pain. And when I ask questions, they lash out often. And so one of the things I think about the I culture that is missing from our I culture is the self-care piece of it. And what can we do, right? One of the things I try to do as an educator is to model that and say, I am also addicted to my phone, right? I want to check the news. I want to look at my fantasy baseball team. I need to figure out if the Knicks lost. They always do, so it's not news. I'm also addicted to my phone, but I'm also working very hard to fight that addiction, and here are the ways that I do that. I love McDonald's French fries. I love them. I haven't had McDonald's French fries in 7 years. I've been clean for 7 years. And I know I'm going to be my body's better, my life's going to be better because I'm not on that McDonald's French fries, right? And it's right across the street from the school, so it's hard. But having that conversation, I also think being honest about our own shit, right? Not lying to our children like we are holier than thou. We are all struggling in that same shit. And so that, I think, is an important piece about these addictions. We just gotta own them, and we gotta talk about them, and we gotta help people to break through.
So just bringing it back to what Kat was saying, you literally took the words out of my mouth. I'm thinking about how we're living in an instantaneous society and we need everything now, we get everything now, and it's all about the I, and we can get anything we want in seconds. And I think that very much ties into all of this because yes, we need to take care of ourselves, and yes, we need to do all these things and eat right. And it's not that I don't know these things, it's just that it's going to take way longer than what we're expected and what we're conditioned to having. And I think that is one of the hardest things to realize in all of this. I could become a vegan, but it's gonna take a while for my body to adjust to that. And we know what we can do to try and make change, but we have to realize that the major change is probably not gonna happen in any of our lifetimes. But if we stop now, then nothing is going to change. Just like we need to continue to make those steps every day and make some type of change in our lives and some type of change in other people's lives, and realizing that those are the seeds that we're gonna plant to have that tree grow over time.
So I have a couple more questions, but I think what I'm going to do is open these questions up to the panelists, but also to the audience. We have a couple of microphone stands, so if you don't, we're trying to record this, so it would be great if you wouldn't mind speaking in, and we can turn up the lights, please, Susan, thank you. If you have a response you want to give, just walk up to one of the microphones, and if you wouldn't mind stating your name, and then like if you have an affiliation with MIT or like what your connection is. So I'm just going to pose these two questions, and then it's like kind of free for whoever would like to answer. So we were talking about the sunken place in the performance, right? And my question is, at what point do we pull ourselves out? How do we awaken ourselves, save ourselves, each other, and the planet? How do we choose a better way to live? And what kind of transformation is necessary and essential for that? And then I mean, there's more than one question, but you get what I'm saying. And then on another side, the other question is, so we've been talking a lot about a lot of social justice issues and art issues, and I'm wondering, you know, we're also interested in collecting data. And there's a lot of data that's not being collected. We're at a research institution here, and so people are collecting data all the time. And in the case of issues that deal with a lot of Black and brown people, data is being ignored. So I'm interested to know, what data do you think we need to be focused on collecting in the future?
So yeah, just connecting this to the last question is fascinating for me to think about how what bees are made to consume, being the antibiotics and the sugar water, it does a kind of work on their bodies for a particular purpose, which, I don't know, to me feels very sexual, like the pollinating project of reproduction. So, you know, there's an ingestion of a thing for a particular purpose. So how that ties into, you know, Black and brown, dark-bodied in general life for me is thinking about what is it that we are actually made to consume, and how does that embody itself in different kinds of ways of being in actions. Quick example, Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. Kids are still drinking lead, and that leads to verifiable outcomes in children's lives, life expectancy, school performance, everything. But this is no longer, and maybe never has been, negligence, right? This is something a lot more insidious than just forgetting. Biological warfare is right. So I guess my project, and what I argue should be all of our projects, is how do we build or work to build transcendent alternative spaces, alternative ways of being in this world. I think it requires a kind of radical collectivity that art can uniquely foster to break down the relationship between I and thou. You know, not to deny the I. Like I'm not a colorblind cat. You know what I mean? Like I'm very, very, very pro-Black. Like extra Black. I'm like super Black. I love Black people so much. Yeah, I mean Black people know, you know what I mean? And there is a kind of collectivity that can happen amongst Black people, which is not a monolith, which is itself diversity, and across the color lines, that things like spirituality, things like art can build in order to build these alternative spaces to give back all that shit that people try to feed us so that we can live for less and less amounts of time.
I wanted to, something that's itching me is that it's not the fault of the people of color, right? It's like, it's very easy to say, well, why are we not making the right choices? What's wrong with us? But this is systemic, like you said it, across the school, it's a McDonald's. Like why, so speaking of data, like why is it that in, you know, most poor communities, what you see around is like the little bodegas that sell you like the pink juice and then the, you know, Snickers bars and, you know, all of that. So that's, you know, the choices are, when you go to if you go to Whole Foods, you know, oh, your choices are great, you know, but you can afford it, you know? So, you know, what are we feeding people of color in, you know, especially, you know, in the communities that are in need? That's the information that we need to find out. Like why, we know that it's strategic. I hate to be like the conspiracy theory or whatever, but there is a reason. There is a reason why, you know, you go to Eggleston Square and you see, I live in Eggleston Square, and I, you know, everything around me, I have to get out of my neighborhood to get, you know, the food that my body will be comfortable with and I can have a healthy life. So I just think it's important to consider that. Sorry, I have many thoughts in my head. besides that, everything I just said, also like the importance of mentors in schools that can say to the children, listen, I know that these are the choices around here, but here are other choices that you can affordably consume things that are healthy for your body.
And I'm just going to say the sunken place isn't an individual. It's not like I'm in a sunken place. It's a metaphor for a condition that we share. And the other thing I was going to say is back to what you guys are saying, like, then if we are in a sunken place, I can't then deal with my personal getting out of it. If we are in a sunken place, then we have to get out of it. And that requires us to think, where are we? And we're in space. And where is that space? And then how do we reconfigure the space? If we don't think spatially, if we don't actually get to the spaces where we are to reconfigure how we are together with ourselves, there will be no getting out of the sunken space. So I just wanted to say we're bodies and there are things happening to us, but there's more to our subjectivity than just our bodies. There's the spaces where we inhabit, the objects that are implicit in how we are together. Those things get designed. There's a lot more to what it means to be together, right? So in order to really figure out this metaphor of the sunken space, we've got to look at the context that we're sunken, and we've got to rethink it all. It's a fascinating time in terms of sort of reimagining what does it mean to be human, what does it mean to be alive. But in order for us to do that, it requires looking at everything.
I think I spend a lot of time thinking about imagery and thinking a lot about water. And I always think about reflections, right? So whenever I see me, I see the reflection of we, consistently. And I think that a lot of folks get into, when we talk about, because a lot of this is about violence, right? And it's about cycles of violence that have kind of consisted throughout history, and it's about us working to interrupt those cycles and what that looks like. And I think in reference to getting out of the sunken space, one, I think that we have to stop being so violent against ourselves, us, me, myself personally against myself. Why would you do that, bitch? And being really hard on myself about why did you eat that extra donut? Little things like that. But then I think that you can start to, if you can be more compassionate with yourself, you can start to be more compassionate with everybody else around you. And I think that is one of the spaces that we need to start to work from in order to be able to see people in different spaces and places, and then you are able to develop more authentic space based on people coming together and recognizing the real life situations that everybody has been in the historical oppression, and the historical trauma and everything that is tied to bodies and biology, and I think, and that's I'm not a scientist, but that's a huge complicated mess when I start to think about it, but I definitely spend time trying to concentrate on it, but I think the place that we need to kind of focus on in terms of where we go to is and I think kind of answering the question about research and how do we look at, data? I always had an issue within statistics because we were always talking about numbers, and I could never get it. I took statistics twice in college accidentally. Got a C- both times, and I was I really don't. And at the end of both terms, I was so you're telling me that this plus or minus is essentially me being able to sway a number to the right or to the left in whatever way I want to see fit. I was well, that doesn't resonate with me. And I was but where's the qualitative in that? How do you document qualitative, right? And what I really feel especially when you think about bodies, because there's a resonance in bodies, right? And I think that there's a vibration, Like, and when we talk about art and we talk about drums and we talk about all these things, like, there's a vibration in all of us, and a lot of that comes from energy, and a lot of that comes from water. And, you know, 90% of the earth is water, 70% of our bodies is water, you know? And we talk about Flint, and we talk about California, and we talk about all these places, right? And so I think that there's something to investigate, like, within that space. I don't really exactly know, like, what that is in terms of data. But, like, I say to, like, the researchers and the scientists in the room, like, I think that there's some play in that.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Hello, everybody. My name is James Mackey. I'm a community organizer, a national activist, and I lead a movement called Stuck on Replay. And thinking about how we are in this society that we live in, there are a lot of black and brown bodies who are incarcerated, who are entering the injustice system. And there are not a lot of people out here really fighting for them. And so once you enter that system, it's like you're stuck. And it's a cycle that continues. So if you think about it, people entering the criminal justice system, black and brown bodies, if we don't do anything about it, we'll be stuck on replay. I just want to say that real quick, but what was your question? Your first question was like extra long, I forgot.
I'm asking what kind of transformation is necessary to get us out of this sunken place.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And then the other one is about the data.
Definitely.
Yeah, what data do we need to be collecting?
I don't have an answer for that question, but I can answer the first one. So I think the issue that is happening around us and for our people and for us in general, right? We don't question that much anymore. So when you were younger, you used to question things. I remember when, you know, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and, you know, my grandmother was a Jehovah's Witness. I grew up that way, but then one day my mom decided to go to church. And I would hear battles between how my grandma would say, don't talk to the Christians. Because they're this people now. Don't disrespect my grandma. I'm just saying that's her belief. And the Christians used to be like, don't talk to Jehovah's Witness. They always knocking at your door. And I'm like, you know, I thought, you know, I looked at my grandma as a wonderful person. And I looked at the Christians as good people. And so I'm like, why are two great people talking about each other? And they should be great. Right? They're great people. And I thought that at a young age, and that's when I really realized that, yo, I have to start questioning the issues between people. And that's when I realized, like, yo, I can't take people's, you know, words for what they say. I have to question it. So, you know, thinking about the criminal justice system, how it's, so I'm sorry, I do a lot around criminal justice, but in general, I just want to, you know, talk about how we don't question things. So when people get locked up, do we have family that's willing to support them? They may pay for lawyer fees, but how far are you willing to go to fight for your brothers or your sisters that's locked up? I remember when, you know, I'm doing this work with Stuck on Replay, and my brother had got locked up, and I was like, yo, I had to sit back, shut up, and reflect on, wait, I'm doing all this work around criminal justice reform, but I can't do anything for my brother? Like, that's something's not right about this picture. And then I had to start making calls to those people who I felt could support my brother. And I'm saying all that to say that we don't question the problems anymore. We just, you know, get in where we fit in. So when we know that we can get an opportunity, we get that opportunity and we just shut up and keep it moving. Because you know what? We don't want to mess it up for our family, but also for other people that come behind us. But that's the issue. When are we going to stand up against it? And if we don't, then we'll be stuck on replay. Thanks.
Can we turn this mic on?
Hi everybody, I'm a first year grad student at MIT. My name is Danielle Olson. I'm in electrical engineering and computer science. And I guess my question is a really good kind of transition after that discussion, because my question is about dreams and sort of seeing all the role models in front of me here today on the panel. I kind of think a lot about my own dreams and sort of where I want to go in the future. And I want to be a professor when I grow up. And so, but I have this written down because I tend to have a lot of thoughts, like a lot of people in the middle. So my specific concern with the academic career path is what Cornel West describes as the double bind between practitioners of color, linking their activities to the fundamental structural overhaul of their sponsoring institutions while needing to remain financially dependent on them. I wonder what a career in academia looks like for a person like myself, knowing that becoming a professor could provide a powerful opportunity to serve as an embodied role model of intellectual authority, challenging the devastatingly pervasive notion of Black and Black female intellectual inferiority. And so that's why I want to be a professor, but at the same time, as a student at MIT, I can acknowledge that the food that I eat comes from the same company feeding prison institutions, and that Ronald McNair Building, who honored our first Black astronaut on the 30th anniversary, the photos of him were blocked by liquid nitrogen tanks. I can't not acknowledge those structural issues within my own institution. So I wonder, how do you all cope with that?
First, you got to talk to that sister sitting right there. Right there in that red jacket. Because she's a professor.
Oh, no. Oh, Sandy.
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm on the spot only because my relationship to data, I think, is a bit ambivalent, because I also come from the background of Black marriage. Right? The Haitian Revolution, and what that took was some secrecy, right? No sharing of data. So it's a difficult question to answer, because I think it would take more than a few minutes, and I think I really do think, the answer is one that should be shared with a wider audience, but because I feel like it's also a point of trauma for me, that it would be an answer that be fleshed out much more deeply and profoundly in probably a personal setting, is what I'd say.
I've had so many different moments in my career as an artist. I went and got a master's, I got an MFA, because I thought that would allow me a little bit more access into the academy and to institutions, which it does. But then I found out, living in New York City, that you make more money as a server, right? You talked about being a server, right? You make more money as a server or a bartender than being an adjunct professor, right? So, and then I figured out that, my access is limited because of this, because the MFA is only the highest degree in art schools or institutions that look at the MFA as the final, the terminal degree. Thank you very much. So I'm like, if I'm really gonna be competitive, hell, I gotta get a PhD. So then I found a PhD program, after 17 or almost 20 years of being out in the world, getting my MFA, and then I realized maybe that's not the time. Maybe I should change my space, change my place to try to shake something up. So I left New York, and that changed. I moved to Los Angeles, which was maybe the greatest risk I ever took. I didn't have, I had less than $1,000 to my name, And within 12 months of that move, I think I was now in the commercial world. I had a commercial music job. And then I'm smiling on TV, and I have to deal with that every day. And I'm so happy to be able to have this balance, but you have to figure out ways that you can just get the balance. Just get the balance, because it's a constant back and forth, and you look for those voices who can support you and don't ever feel isolated, that you're alone, because there's other people who are going through the same struggle. That's my institution, to commercial world, to just being in the world. That's my experience.
I also want to add something. Don't give up on your dream. That's the one thing that the moment you give up on your dream, you're done and you're lost. So go through the process. We've all gone through a process of figuring out how we get to where we get to. I read books. I journaled. I did all the parachute book. The road less traveled, all those things. I did all that, and I wrote, and it all came back to dance and choreography and directing and producing, and it's hard, and it's not a lot of money, and you have to figure out how to, effectively write grants and find the right funders, and it's like an uphill battle nonstop because there's a lot of competition. But the dream, I don't want to do anything else. This is who I am. This is my passion. So please, whatever it is. And I also want to point to Lisa Cooper, who can also speak to you. If you can find a time to check in with us.
For the interest of time, I'm gonna make sure that all of the contact information for these amazing people are somehow connected with the B-Boy Cast website so that we can be in contact and have these conversations. Please go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Reynolds Graves, and I'm a lobbyist here in Boston at Rasky Partners, which is in downtown Boston. A lot of people always ask me when I said that, what does a lobbyist do? What is that all about? So we essentially work with policy stakeholders and elected officials to influence their decisions one way or another, either opposition or proponents. Part of that is also business development, and one of my favorite of my 15 clients that I have in my Rolodex is Axon Enterprises, which is a tech company headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, and they manufacture two things. One is a non-lethal weapon, also known as a taser, which is carried by police officers, and the other is a different variations of a body-worn camera for police. So on the data question, and as I'm sure many of you know, the city of Boston is currently going through a Boston body camera pilot. It's been one of the craziest political battles I've ever seen in my life. It's worse than healthcare, honestly. But it is, it's been extended, it's being deliberated. Northeastern's doing a study of the data of the cameras. Meanwhile, the company that we work with, Axon, is pretty much a leader. They're in 42 cities across the United States and internationally. It's compared to the competitors, it's like Apple versus Android as far as the quality goes. It's all uploaded in a cloud. You can redact the video, all this stuff. It's pretty high-tech stuff. Methuen, Massachusetts is the only city in Massachusetts that actually has body cameras on full deployment, and that's only 50 sworn officers. So I guess my question to you, well, part of what we're doing with this pilot now, working with the Boston Police, is constantly meeting with city councilors, constantly meeting with the police commissioner. I've had way too many coffees with that guy. And a lot of it is we're us strategizing, how do we move the needle? How do we get them closer to full deployment of these body cameras before an incident happens and not as a reactive thing? And a lot of it is I'm the only black dude at my firm, so I'm sitting there saying, we should probably apply some pressure with some community groups. So, some of you have called. I know Nia, I've called your phone and bugged you with NAACP. I apologize, but I don't. At the same time, but part of what we're trying to do is mobilize community groups to say, hey, Boston BPD, you should put these cameras on these officers like yesterday. And so I guess my question, I just wanted to kind of stress, to answer your question, the data I think we should be covering is video data. I think it is data that is worn on officers, data that is either on their chest or on their shoulder, on their glasses, or data that is recorded and sent directly to the DA's office for trying of a criminal, instead of having to actually have 2 squad car officers carry over a CD-ROM, if anyone even knows what those are anymore, which wastes time and money. But then my question to you all who work in social justice and who work in this atmosphere is, what are your thoughts on body cameras? I know that can't necessarily solve the problem of police brutality or what have you, but it's certainly, in my opinion, and as I've been advocating for the past 18 months or so, can stop them from, quite frankly, killing us. And I know that's just, it's the black community and the social justice realm is not monolithic, so there's a whole bunch of different feelers out there, so I was just kind of
curious what y'all thought about that.
I just want to make one comment to that. Thinking about my own family and uncles and brothers that have been through some things with police officers, and given the history of this wonderful city that we live in, I'm all for video data collection. The concern I have is the city ready for the secrets that are going to be unveiled? No. Because that means people, but for real, people in those positions that have been hiding and sneaking things off to the side and paying people whatever, if the truth was truly unveiled, that revealed all the shady shit that's been happening for decades and years, is the city ready to deal with those secrets? We can't even apologize for slavery, let alone let's talk about black on black crime and black men being lynched or whatever the case is. What would this city look like if cops were put in jail for the wrong? Would this city be able to deal with that? Or are we going back to very difficult times that we try to get over? So I'm all for that, but is the commissioner ready? Is BPD ready? And what example does that set for the rest of the state if only Methuen is only doing it? Because Boston right now is the epicenter of being the first for everything. Do we want to be the first for being shady for our shit? I don't know. I have no idea. But that's my comment too. I think it's absolutely worth it. I just don't know if we're ready for the secrecy to be unveiled right now.
I think it's totally worth it also, but my big thing I'm looking at nationally is, will I get a guilty verdict? I think they've shown, I've seen the videos of them shot, I've seen, you know what I mean, we've recorded it even from the outside. I think that we have to push policy that actually gets them a guilty verdict. I mean, even if you think about today with, I forgot, I can't breathe, give me his name right now, Eric Garner. When you think about that, and for those cops to get off, as much as all of us marched, we hashtag, we've done our part. But if we're not changing the actual legal system, you know what I mean? We're policing the police, that's lightweight. They already know they're stealing. We've already seen it. We've seen training today, we've lived it, some of us, you know what I mean? And I'm also thinking about with the body cameras, when I was watching the news recently, they were talking about like surveillance in Mass Ave. What are the parameters for that? How far does this surveillance really go? Because like I said, if I'm just walking my dog down to Charles, I don't need you guys staring at me in my head. So I'm thinking about we have to kind of get beyond policing and actually start being preventative and protecting each other.
So, Reynolds, you know that NAACP supported body cameras and is still in support of body cameras. I think I'm thinking a little more about some of the philosophical issues and just thinking about the rest of the conversation tonight. And the research question. So one of the things with body cameras, and the reason NAACP was in support of it, even understanding that it was not a permanent fixture or hardly comprehensive at all, is the idea that people change their behavior when they know they're being watched. So the Hawthorne effect. And then it makes me think of the research and the data question. And I'm also thinking about Kenneth's question. I've had a list since childhood, and sometimes it comes back and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm having trouble saying Kenneth's name for some reason. So thinking about Ken, I'll say Ken. So thinking about how Ken talked about how black people exist currently in the United States and how we're regarded. And so what's interesting to me is to think about ourselves usually as the subject of research, usually by researchers who were not us. So usually under study, usually a spectacle, usually under a microscope. And then what's been interesting about movements occurring today, and Black Lives Matter has been at the fore of that. And again, trying to attach it to the larger conversation has been a re-examination of how we exist. So that questioning and rethinking who should be studied. So I think about, is it Claudia Rankine? So I'm thinking about Claudia Rankine. You know, there was an article I think that came out a couple of years ago in the Washington Post that looked at white, affluent, segregated neighborhoods and said, what's wrong with those neighborhoods? Because we're used to having conversations, and you talked about this, about what's wrong with us, and what's wrong with our communities, and what's wrong with our neighborhoods. So when I think about the research question and the data question, that also then makes me think of you know, how we regard ourselves as subjects, how we regard ourselves in relation to everyone else, how we hold ourselves accountable, how there's a hypercriticality. I think you talked about that, and how we could probably do with some re-examination, some questioning, and shifting the lens a little bit. And start asking some different questions. And with the police thing, what I really think about now is I think about how every single time, so I personally am not a person who thinks, you know, jail time or guilty verdict is ultimate justice. But what I do think about, if we're just thinking about humanity, how we are telling people who've killed other people, and I'm thinking about, you talking earlier just about the sanctity of human life, how right now we are steadily telling people who've killed other people, that's okay. And we're steadily telling killers and murderers, you're okay, and they're not. And that's something that I think about, how we actually have a lot of people who are unhealthy in ways that we haven't talked about tonight. And we're telling them, you're fine, you're normal, you're healthy, and they're not, actually.
Thank you. We're going to take one last, thank you. We're going to take one last comment or question, and then we got to, oh, okay, one, and then that's it. Sorry, we got to go. I love this, though. I could be here for a whole weekend with y'all. Thank you.
Cool. My name is Jonathan Badgley. I'm an economist. I'm not affiliated with MIT or any arts program, actually. But I did just want to kind of boost art again. I recognize that I'm a white person in a black space, and I walked up to the mic and I'm speaking now. And that kind of intrusion is sometimes, you talked about it earlier, so I wanted to kind of draw out one of the things that you brought up that I thought was most striking was that when there's an intrusion into the beehive, all the bees have the same, they start going in the same frequency. So then I was thinking about, okay, well, all right, the huge component of this work is that it's musical, and I was thinking about my experience with black music, especially jazz, hip hop, and the way that interacting with those art forms helped me understand and reflect and think about the views that I had. So I just wanted to kind of respond to the question about how do we change, and I think black art is a way that you can actually affect not just the black community, you can also affect the white community. And there was also this element where there's this, you were kind of worried about transforming from a bee boy yourself into a bee girl. And I was thinking, all right, as an intruder, I'm definitely not gonna become a bee, but I can start to understand and appreciate it. So I just wanted to say another positive thing about art, that black art actually changes things, that actually affects people. So yeah. So.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tamashi. I am, what am I? I'm an artist, and I'm a graduate of, I was once a graduate student here at MIT in this room. I'm a product of the program in Art, Culture, and Technology in the School of Architecture, and I'm currently a professor, an assistant professor at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, the only publicly funded art and design college in the country. And I want to say thank you. Wow, nothing like this was happening when I was a student here, let me tell you. Nothing like this was happening when I was a student here, so this is really amazing. And I appreciate the data question. I appreciate so much that's been talked about so far. And what's on my mind is that, you know, the sources of aggression, the problem is not abstract. So when you were talking about, Charlotte asked, like, what do we need to come out of the sunken place? And I feel like saying things plain, thinking critically, saying things plain, and resisting the compulsion for denial is something that I'm really working on with my students and in my relationships with people of color and people and white people also. Just to be very clear and to be and to try to, I'm trying to watch myself for like accepting denial as an acceptable strategy. You know, like so like this stuff just happened at Fenway Park, right? This racism just happened at Fenway Park, and I was on Facebook and watching as for a couple of my friends, middle-aged white men showed up on their walls dismissing the event as significant. Like, oh, well, you haven't been to enough parks. Like, have you been to other games? Or, you know, well, 40 years ago, white kids were bused to black neighborhoods, and that wasn't nice. So, you know, like just like really weird tools of deflection. And kind of like the way Guillermo talked about what happens inside of the bees, you know, toxic stress is produced inside of us when we have to like maneuver around this stuff, you know, maneuver around truth. It's toxic. So one of the really awesome things I've learned about data from my best friend Nia, and one of my heroes, three of my heroes I've learned later in life were all focused on education as a tool, as a shield and sword. Thurgood Marshall and Octavia Butler and Nia K. Evans. It always comes back to education and data around education. And if you think about this town, in particular, it's so historically known for being so illustrative of the fact that education and educational equity is the battleground. That's where everything changed. That's where these people lost their minds. And they've been crazy ever since 1954. All this great again stuff, it means like 1953. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like as far as like data goes, besides the fact that we need to be understanding like how to produce food again, those of us who've forgotten, who've like been removed from those roots, I feel like understanding what's being taken. A lot of us have no idea how significant Brown versus the Board of Education was to all public space. All public space was transformed by that case. It was the Trojan horse that gave us the Schoolhouse Rock and PBS and everything else, magnet schools and centers for enriched studies, and art was the crux of that transformational strategy. Art and integration so that we could learn to love each other and humanize each other and see each other as full human beings from an early age. And look at what these people are hot look at what people have been hot to burn up ever since, is access to education. Look at it took this town 20 years to abide by that unanimous Supreme Court decision, a Supreme Court decision that would never happen today. That would never happen today. So I feel like I get so much. There's so much that I don't know, and I feel like I get so much from learning about these court cases because this is where the battle is. So, in the court cases oversee housing, justice and injustice, medical experimentation, and it's not abstract. And the source of these aggressions, the way that we are dying as people, not as bodies, but as human beings, is not abstract at all. But the beautiful thing about art is this continues to be this miraculous Trojan horse that allows us to learn experientially as the makers and as the consumers. So it's always rich with possibility to bring us together. And wiser people than any of us have known that for a long time. I think we need to just go ahead and take that back.
Okay, we gotta wrap this up, but I thought I would just end with a quote from James Baldwin, deity James Baldwin. Love does not begin and end the way we seem to think it does. Love is a battle, love is a war, love is a growing up. Thank you all so much for being here, our panelists. I love you, thank you. Collaborators, thank you so much. All of you, thank you for being here. MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology, Susan Wilson, thank you, Susan. Music and Theater Arts, Sarah, Josh, Alexa, thank you so much. And Harvest Works and all of you, thank you. Have a good night. That was awesome. I wish your students could have been here.